The text message hit my phone like a lightning bolt at 7:30 Tuesday morning. "We're moving in Monday." Ashley's words glowed on my screen, followed by a grinning emoji that made my stomach drop. Dad already approved everything. The kids are so excited about the lake. I stared at the message, rereading it 3 times before the reality sank in. My sister was talking about my lake house, my $515,000 sanctuary that I'd worked myself to the bone to afford. I reached for my phone to call her when the security system notification pinged across my screen. Motion detected. Trespassing recorded. My blood turned to ice as I opened the live feed and saw moving trucks in my driveway. 3 years ago, I never imagined I'd be living this nightmare. Back then, I was Janine Collins, a newly promoted marketing director at Henderson Analytics, finally earning enough to pursue my dream of lakefront living. After my divorce from Marcus, a manipulative control freak who drained my savings on his gambling addiction, I'd promised myself something beautiful, something that belonged only to me. The house hunting process nearly broke me, month after month of weekend drives to properties that either fell through or got snatched up by cash buyers. I remember the exhaustion of reviewing mortgage documents until my eyes burned, calculating every penny of my budget down to the last dollar. The stress of credit checks and employment verifications while juggling 60-hour work weeks. But the day I walked through the front door of the Cedar Lake property, everything clicked into place. The realtor Janet Morrison noticed my reaction immediately. "This is the one, isn't it?" she'd said as I stood on the wraparound porch watching sunlight dance across the pristine water. The house stretched along the shoreline like something from a magazine with floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the lake right into the living room. 2,200 square feet of pure tranquility nestled among towering pine trees that had been growing there since before my grandparents were born. The closing day felt like graduation wedding day, and Christmas morning rolled into one. I signed paper after paper, my hand cramping from the sheer volume of documents, but my heart soaring with each signature. When Janet handed me those keys, I actually cried right there in the title company office. This wasn't just real estate. This was proof that I could rebuild my life from the ashes Marcus had left behind. My sister Ashley had been struggling financially for as long as I could remember. At 35, she'd already filed for bankruptcy twice, burned through 3 failed business ventures, and constantly borrowed money from our parents that she never repaid. Her husband Derek worked sporadically in construction, spending more time at the local bar than on job sites. Their 3 children, ages 5 through 12, had been shuffled between schools more times than I could count, due to constant moves and evictions. Meanwhile, our parents, Gerald and Barbara, had always expected me to handle my own problems, while they swooped in to rescue Ashley from every self-created crisis. When I needed help with college tuition, they told me to take out loans. When Ashley's first business failed, they handed her $15,000 without question. The pattern had been established since childhood. Ashley was the victim who needed saving, and I was the responsible one who could take care of herself. That Tuesday morning, as I stared at my security feed showing strangers unloading furniture onto my property, my father's voice boomed through my phone speaker. "Janine, honey, we need to talk. Ashley's family needs a place to stay temporarily, and you've got all that room just sitting empty most of the time." "Dad, what are you talking about? Nobody asked me about this. Those are moving trucks in my driveway." "Now, sweetheart, don't get yourself worked up. It's just for a few weeks until Ashley finds a new apartment. You know how tough the rental market is these days." I felt the familiar weight of family obligation pressing down on my shoulders, but something else was building underneath it. A hot, sharp awareness that this conversation felt rehearsed like Dad had practiced these exact words. "How long has this been planned?" The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a defensive edge that made my skin crawl. "Well, we might have used the house as collateral for a small loan to help Ashley with her food truck business. Nothing major. The bank just needed some security." The ground shifted beneath my feet. My sanctuary, my proof of independence, my escape from years of financial abuse had been gambled away without my knowledge or consent. My own family had treated my most precious possession like a poker chip in Ashley's endless game of financial disaster. I drove to the lake house like a woman possessed my Honda Civic, eating up the 45-minute drive in 32 minutes flat. The scene that greeted me was worse than the security footage had suggested. Ashley stood in my driveway like a general commanding troops directing two sweating movers toward my garage. She wore a flowy sundress that I'd never seen before, and oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Janine perfect timing. Ashley's voice carried that artificially bright tone she used when she knew she was in the wrong. "I was just getting the guys started on the heavy stuff. Derek's already inside setting up the living room furniture." "What living room furniture, Ashley? What is happening here?" My sister tilted her head like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. "Dad said you were fine with us staying here while we get back on our feet. The kids are so excited to have their own rooms for the first time in 2 years." As if summoned by her words, Ashley's children came tearing around the corner of the house. 8-year-old Brittany was dragging a muddy stick twice her size, while 5-year-old Tyler chased 12-year-old Madison with a water balloon. Nobody was watching them. Nobody seemed to care that Tyler was heading straight for the rose bushes I'd spent 2 summers nurturing into perfect bloom. "Ashley, stop. Just stop everything right now. Dad never talked to me about any housing arrangement. This is my house and I never agreed to anything." The confused expression that crossed Ashley's face was so perfectly practiced that I almost believed it myself. Almost. But Dad said. She reached into her oversized Coach purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He wrote it down and everything. Look, it says right here that Janine agrees to temporary housing arrangement for Ashley's family." I snatched the paper from her hands. Sure enough, in my father's distinctive handwriting were the words that Ashley had quoted. But the handwriting looked rushed, almost frantic, and there was no signature, no date, no official anything. Just a desperate scribble that looked more like a grocery list than a legal document. "This isn't a contract, Ashley. This is a note Dad wrote to himself. It doesn't mean anything." "Well, I don't know about all that legal stuff." Derek's voice came from behind me, causing me to spin around. Ashley's husband stood in my doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel that had definitely come from my kitchen. "But I do know that we've already put down deposits on utilities and changed our mailing address. The post office doesn't just do that for fun, you know." Derek had always made me uncomfortable. He was the kind of man who stood too close when he talked and made jokes that weren't quite funny enough to laugh at, but weren't quite offensive enough to call out. Today, he looked particularly pleased with himself, like he'd just won a prize he hadn't expected to win. Before I could respond to Derek's presumptuous statement, another car pulled into my driveway. My mother's silver Buick sedan parked behind the moving truck, and Barbara Collins climbed out carrying 4 bags of groceries and wearing the same determined expression she'd worn to every PTA meeting when Ashley and I were kids. "Oh, good you're here." Mom's voice carried across the driveway as she struggled with the grocery bags. "I picked up some essentials to get Ashley's family started. You know how expensive it is to stock a kitchen from scratch." I watched in stunned silence as my mother began unpacking groceries like she owned the place. Organic milk, gluten-free bread, the expensive kind of peanut butter that cost $8 a jar. She was setting up Ashley's family for a long stay, not a temporary crisis solution. "Mom, what is going on? Why does everyone seem to think this is already decided? Barbara straightened up from the grocery bags and gave me the look that had ended 1,000 childhood arguments. "Janine, honey, family helps family. Ashley's been through such a hard time lately, and you're doing so well for yourself. It just makes sense for everyone to pitch in where they can." Pitch in? This isn't pitching in, this is moving into my house without asking. "Well," Mom's voice took on that patient tone that meant she was about to deliver a lecture. "We didn't think we needed to ask. You're here alone in this big, beautiful house most of the time anyway, and Ashley's children need stability for the school year. Little Tyler is finally doing well in his reading group." I looked around at my property, which was rapidly being transformed into something I didn't recognize. Derek had apparently been busy inside because through the windows, I could see furniture that definitely wasn't mine arranged in my living room. Ashley was directing the movers toward my master bedroom, calling out instructions about which boxes went where. My mother was organizing my kitchen cabinets to accommodate Ashley's groceries. "How long has this been planned?" I asked again, but this time I was looking directly at Mom. Barbara's face flushed slightly, the same way it had when she'd been caught eating Ashley's Halloween candy when we were kids. "Well, we didn't want to bother you at work with all the details. You're always so busy with that important job of yours. We figured we'd get everything settled and then explain the situation once Ashley was moved in." The admission hit me like a physical blow. My family had planned this entire invasion without consulting me because they'd simply assumed I'd go along with it. They'd counted on my history of being the responsible one, the peacekeeper, the sister who never caused problems. They'd gambled that I wouldn't fight back. Standing in my own driveway watching strangers move furniture into my sanctuary while my family acted like I was being unreasonable for objecting, I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. The little girl who'd always tried to keep everyone happy was finally completely furious. 7 days later, my lake house had become unrecognizable. I'd spent the week in a strange limbo sleeping at my downtown apartment while trying to figure out how to reclaim my own property. Every evening after work, I'd driven out to check on things, and every evening the situation had gotten worse. Derek had installed a massive satellite dish on my roof without asking permission from anyone. The thing was enormous, a silver eyesore that could probably pick up television signals from Mars. When I confronted him about it, he'd shrugged and said the kids needed their cartoons, as if that explanation somehow made unauthorized roof modifications acceptable. The backyard, which had been my peaceful retreat, now looked like a daycare center had exploded. Derek had built an elaborate swing set using materials that definitely weren't up to county building codes. The kids had worn a path between the house and the water that was destroying the carefully maintained grass. Plastic toys floated in my pristine lake, bumping against the dock like colorful pieces of pollution. But walking into the house was the real shock. Ashley had completely redecorated my master bedroom with furniture that looked like it belonged in a teenager's room. Pink curtains covered my elegant blinds. Stuffed animals crowded the windowsill where I used to keep my small succulent garden. The beautiful hardwood floors were covered with cartoon-themed rugs that clashed with everything I'd chosen for the space. "Oh, you're back." Ashley emerged from what used to be my walk-in closet carrying an armload of my clothes. "I was just making some space for Derek's work uniforms. I hope you don't mind, but I boxed up some of your things and put them in the garage. You've got so many clothes, and we really needed the room for family stuff." I followed her to the garage, my stomach sinking with each step. Cardboard boxes labeled Janine's extra clothes and Janine's decorations were stacked along the walls like storage units. My beautiful throw pillows, my carefully chosen artwork, my grandmother's antique jewelry box all packed away like seasonal decorations. "Ashley, these aren't extra clothes. These are my things, from my bedroom, in my house. I know. Ashley waved her hand dismissively as she headed back toward the house. But we're all family here, and honestly, some of that stuff was pretty outdated anyway. I think the house looks much more welcoming now, more lived in. The kitchen had been transformed into something that belonged in a completely different house. Ashley's colorful dinnerware filled my cabinets. Her collection of rooster-themed decorations covered my countertops. The refrigerator, which used to display my carefully curated collection of local restaurant menus, was now covered in crayon drawings and school permission slips. Derek wandered in from the basement covered in sawdust and wearing a satisfied grin. "Hey, Janine, check this out." He unfolded a set of blueprints on my dining room table, spreading them out over the surface I'd just had professionally refinished 6 months ago. "I'm converting the basement into a proper workshop. Ashley thinks it'll add value to the house." I stared at the blueprints in disbelief. Derek had drawn up plans for a complete basement renovation that would cost thousands of dollars and probably violate half a dozen building codes. He wanted to install industrial lighting, ventilation systems, and workbenches. He'd measured everything, calculated square footage, even priced out materials. "Derek, you cannot renovate my basement. This isn't your house." "Well, not technically." Derek's grin never wavered. "But Ashley and I figure that since we're living here now, we might as well make some improvements. I mean, that basement is just wasted space right now, and I've got all these tools that need proper storage." Ashley nodded enthusiastically from the kitchen doorway. "Plus, Derek's really handy. He can do all the work himself, so it won't cost you anything except materials. It's basically like getting free renovations." I wanted to scream that I hadn't asked for renovations, free or otherwise, that my house had been perfect the way it was, that every change they'd made felt like vandalism. But before I could form a coherent response, Derek continued talking. "I've already started ordering some of the supplies. The lumber should be delivered Thursday, and I found a great deal on workshop lighting online. Don't worry about the permits and stuff. I know a guy at the county office who can fast-track the paperwork." The casual way he discussed major construction projects on my property made my head spin. Derek was talking about my house like it was his personal renovation project, like I was just a roommate who'd happened to be there first. Ashley supported every word he said, nodding along like they were discussing what to have for dinner, instead of unauthorized construction that could affect my property value and insurance coverage. That evening, I sat in my downtown apartment staring at a stack of letters from my homeowners association. Apparently, my neighbors had been calling to complain about noise violations, multiple cars parked on the grass, and children playing unsupervised near the water. The association was threatening fines for violations of community standards and reminded me that lakefront properties were subject to stricter regulations than other neighborhoods. I'd moved to Cedar Lake specifically because of those regulations. The community standards were part of what made the neighborhood so peaceful and beautiful. Now my house was becoming the problem property that every homeowners association dreaded. But the final letter in the stack made my blood run cold. It was from Ashley's current landlord, dated 2 weeks earlier, formally notifying her that her lease would not be renewed due to multiple violations and unpaid rent. According to the letter, Ashley had 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days that had already passed. Ashley hadn't been evicted suddenly. She hadn't been surprised by unexpected circumstances. She'd known for weeks that she needed to move, and instead of finding appropriate housing within her budget, she'd simply decided to move into my lake house. The whole family emergency was a carefully orchestrated plan to get free housing without my consent. I called my father, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. "Dad, I need to know the truth about this loan. Did you really use my house as collateral?" Gerald's sigh came through the phone like a deflating balloon. Honey, it's complicated. Ashley needed help with her business, and the bank required some kind of security. Your house was just sitting there, and we thought, you thought that you could gamble with my home without telling me? Now, Janine, don't be dramatic. It's not gambling when it's family. Ashley's going to pay back every penny once the food truck starts bringing in steady income. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Dad, Ashley's lease was terminated 2 weeks ago for non-payment. She didn't just lose her apartment. She was kicked out for not paying rent. How is someone who can't pay $800 a month going to pay back a business loan? The long pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. My father hadn't asked those questions because he hadn't wanted to hear the answers. He'd enabled Ashley's financial irresponsibility for so long that he'd lost the ability to see her clearly. Your sister's been through a rough patch. Dad finally said, his voice defensive. Derek's been having trouble finding steady work, and the kids need stability. We're just trying to help family get back on their feet. By sacrificing my stability, by using my house as a safety net for Ashley's poor decisions? Janine, you're being selfish. You've got a good job, no kids to worry about, plenty of money in the bank. Ashley's struggling to keep her family together. The word selfish hit me like a slap. After years of working 80-hour weeks to build financial security, after sacrificing my own comfort to afford the lake house, after surviving an abusive marriage that had left me starting over from nothing, my own father was calling me selfish for wanting to protect what I'd earned. I hung up the phone and sat in my silent apartment staring at the wall where I'd planned to hang a painting of the lake house. For 3 years, that house had represented everything I'd overcome and everything I'd achieved. Now it felt like proof that no matter how hard I worked or how far I came, my family would always see me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. I drove to my parents' house Friday evening with every intention of keeping my voice calm and my arguments rational. I'd practiced the conversation in my head during the entire drive, focusing on facts and finances rather than emotions. I would explain why the current arrangement wasn't working, present a timeline for Ashley to find alternative housing, and establish clear boundaries going forward. That plan lasted approximately 30 seconds. I found Gerald and Barbara in their kitchen sitting at the same table where we'd had family dinners for 20 years, drinking coffee and looking utterly unconcerned about the chaos they'd created in my life. When I walked in, they barely looked up from their evening newspaper. "Oh, hello, sweetheart," Mom said without lifting her eyes from the crossword puzzle. "How's everything going at the lake? Ashley says the kids are settling in beautifully." "Mom, Dad, we need to talk about this housing situation immediately. It has to end." Gerald finally looked up from his paper, his expression already shifting into the patient face he used when he thought one of his daughters was being unreasonable. "Now, Janine, let's not get worked up about this. Ashley's family just needs a little time to get sorted out. It's been a week and they've already started major renovations without my permission. Derek has blueprints for a basement workshop. Ashley has redecorated my bedroom and packed away my belongings. This isn't temporary and it isn't helping. It's taking over." Barbara set down her pen and gave me the same look she'd used when I'd complained about Ashley borrowing my clothes without asking in high school. "Honey, you're being dramatic. Family shares with family. Ashley's been through such a difficult time, and you're in a position to help. We raised you to be more generous than this." The word generous sparked something dangerous in my chest. Generous, I've been generous my entire life. I paid my own way through college while you handed Ashley money for every failed business idea. I rebuilt my life after Marcus destroyed my finances while you bailed Ashley out of bankruptcy. I bought that house with money I earned working 70-hour weeks, while Ashley has never held a steady job for more than 6 months. Janine Marie Collins. Gerald's voice carried the warning tone that had ended countless childhood arguments. That is enough. Your sister is struggling, and we're disappointed in your attitude. My attitude, Dad? You used my house as collateral for a loan without telling me. You gave Ashley permission to move into my home without asking me. You've treated my property like it belongs to the whole family instead of to me. And I'm the one with the attitude problem. I could feel my voice rising, feel the careful control I'd maintained for a week starting to crack. But instead of reining myself in, I let the anger build. These people had counted on my politeness, my desire to keep peace, my history of giving in to avoid conflict. They'd gambled that I would swallow my objections rather than cause a scene. You know what disappoints me? I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. That my own parents think so little of my judgment and my rights that you'd make major decisions about my life without including me in the conversation. That you'd risk my financial security to enable Ashley's refusal to take responsibility for her own choices. Now you listen here. Gerald stood up from the table, his face flushing red. Ashley is your sister. She's family. And if that loan defaults, the bank isn't going to care whose name is on the deed. They'll take the house regardless. At least this way Ashley's family helps maintain the property value. The admission hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. My father had just confirmed that Ashley's presence wasn't about helping her get back on her feet. It was about protecting the collateral on a loan that was already in danger of defaulting. My house wasn't being used to help Ashley. It was being used to protect my parents from the consequences of their own poor financial decisions. So, this whole thing is about protecting yourselves, I said slowly. You're not helping Ashley find housing. You're hiding her in my house so the bank doesn't realize the loan is bad. Barbara's face went pale. Janine, that's not how we intended. That's exactly how you intended it. The words came out louder than I'd planned, but I didn't care anymore. You've been lying to me from the beginning. This was never about Ashley needing temporary help. This was about you needing to cover up a loan that's going to default. I drove to the lake house in a fury that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. By the time I reached my driveway, the sun was setting and the house was lit up like a Christmas display. Every room had lights on, music was playing from somewhere inside, and I could smell barbecue smoke coming from my backyard. I walked through my front door to find Derek grilling burgers on a new outdoor barbecue set that definitely hadn't been there that morning. Ashley's children were running through my living room wearing wet bathing suits, dripping lake water on my hardwood floors. Ashley herself was in my kitchen cooking what looked like dinner for 8 people. "Oh, perfect, you're just in time for dinner," Ashley called out cheerfully. "Derek grilled way too much food. I hope you're hungry." "Ashley, we need to talk, right now." Something in my voice must have penetrated her cheerful act, because she stopped stirring whatever was in the pot and turned to face me. "Is everything okay? You look upset." "I want everyone out of my house by tomorrow evening. This arrangement is over." Ashley's face went through a series of expressions from confusion to hurt to anger before settling on something that looked almost like pity. "Janine, I think you're overreacting. We're all getting along fine here. The kids love having so much space to play. The kids have destroyed my backyard and are dripping water all over my floors. Derek has started unauthorized renovations. You've packed away my belongings and redecorated my bedroom without permission. None of this is getting along fine." Derek chose that moment to walk through the sliding glass door carrying a platter of grilled meat and wearing a satisfied grin. "What's all the commotion about dinner smells great, babe?" "Derek, I need your family to pack up and leave tomorrow." The grin faded from Derek's face, replaced by something harder. "Now hold on there, Janine. We've got rights here. We've been living in this house for over a week. We've established residency. You can't just kick us out without proper notice." The casual way he discussed rights and residency made my skin crawl. Derek had clearly researched the legal implications of their unauthorized move-in. He was prepared to fight eviction. "You don't have any rights here, Derek. You're trespassing." "Actually," Derek's voice carried the smug confidence of someone who'd done his homework. "Squatters' rights in this state kick in after 30 days of continuous occupation. But even before that, you can't evict someone without going through proper legal channels, especially when there are children involved." Ashley nodded supportively, moving to stand next to her husband. "Derek's right. We've been doing research, and there are laws about this kind of thing. You can't just throw a family out on the street because you're having a bad day." I stared at them both, finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or a family favor gone wrong. Ashley and Derek had deliberately moved into my house, knowing they had no permission and no invitation. They'd researched the legal protections available to squatters. They'd planned this invasion with the same care most people put into planning a vacation. "Get out!" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house right now." "Janine, you're being unreasonable." Ashley's voice took on a whining quality that reminded me of every childhood argument we'd ever had. "We're family. Family doesn't treat family like this." "Family doesn't steal from family either," I shot back. "Family doesn't move into someone's house without permission and then claim legal rights to stay there." Derek stepped forward, and suddenly he seemed much larger than I'd remembered. "Look, Janine, we're trying to be reasonable here. We're willing to help with utilities and maintenance while we're staying here. But we're not leaving until we find appropriate housing for our children." Then you should have found appropriate housing before you moved in here without permission." I walked toward my master bedroom, intending to start removing Ashley's belongings myself. If they wouldn't leave voluntarily, I'd make it clear that they weren't welcome. But when I reached for the doorknob, Ashley grabbed my wrist. "Don't you dare touch our things." Ashley's voice had lost all pretense of sweetness. "We've got as much right to be here as you do. More actually, since we've got children who need stability." I pulled my wrist away from her grip, but Ashley moved to block the bedroom doorway. Behind her, Derek was advancing across the living room with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. "You're jealous," Ashley continued, her voice getting louder and more vicious. "You've always been jealous that I have a family and you don't. You can't stand that Derek and I are happy together while you're still bitter about your divorce." "Ashley, move away from the door." "You're pathetic, Janine. Living all alone in this big house, working all the time because you don't have anyone who actually cares about you. At least our kids will have good memories of this place instead of just emptiness." Something snapped inside my chest. I stepped forward to push past Ashley into my own bedroom, but she shoved me backward with both hands. I stumbled, but caught my balance, then moved toward the door again. This time, Derek grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "I think you need to calm down," Derek said, his face inches from mine. "You're getting hysterical and you're scaring the kids." I twisted away from Derek's grip, using more force than I'd intended. He stumbled backward, his shoulder hitting the door frame hard enough to make a sound. But instead of steadying himself, Derek let himself fall dramatically to the floor, clutching his shoulder and groaning like he'd been seriously injured. "Oh my God!" Ashley screamed, running to Derek's side. "Janine, what is wrong with you? You can't just attack people because you're not getting your way." "I didn't attack anyone. Derek grabbed me and I pulled away." "You pushed him." Ashley was already reaching for her phone. "You deliberately hurt my husband because you're having some kind of breakdown. This is exactly what Mom and Dad were worried about." Derek was making wounded sounds that seemed completely disproportionate to what had actually happened, but Ashley was treating him like he'd been seriously injured. She was already dialing 911, speaking into her phone in a panicked voice that carried clearly across the room. "I need police at 472 Lakeshore Drive immediately. My sister just attacked my husband. She's acting erratically and we're afraid for our safety. We have 3 young children in the house." I stood frozen in my own living room, watching Ashley perform for the emergency dispatcher. She was describing me as violent and unstable, painting herself as a victim protecting her family from a dangerous relative. Every word she spoke was technically true, but completely removed from context. "She's been acting strange ever since we moved in to help with the house." Ashley continued into the phone. "She's been making threats and today she just snapped. My husband tried to calm her down and she threw him against the wall." Derek was nodding weakly from the floor, holding his shoulder and looking like he might pass out. Ashley's children had appeared from somewhere and were watching the scene with wide, frightened eyes. To anyone walking into this situation, I would look like the aggressor, and they would look like a family under attack. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found Ashley comforting Derek while their children huddled together on the couch. Ashley had tears streaming down her face as she explained how I'd lost control and become violent when they'd tried to discuss household arrangements. Derek showed the officers scratches on his arm that he claimed came from my fingernails when I'd thrown him against the wall. My parents arrived while I was giving my statement to the officers. Apparently, Ashley had called them immediately after calling the police, telling them that I was having some kind of mental breakdown and had attacked Derek in front of the children. Barbara took one look at the scene and immediately went to comfort Ashley, who collapsed into dramatic sobs about how frightened the children had been. Gerald spoke quietly with Derek, who was now claiming that his shoulder might be dislocated and he might need medical attention. "Officer," Gerald addressed the younger of the 2 policemen. "I think my daughter has been under tremendous stress since her divorce. She's been acting erratically lately, and we've been worried about her mental state. This whole situation seems to stem from some kind of breakdown she's having." I watched in stunned silence as my own family painted me as unstable and dangerous, while portraying Ashley's unauthorized invasion of my home as a generous housing arrangement that I'd suddenly and violently rejected. Every word they spoke was designed to make me look unreasonable and them look like concerned relatives dealing with a family member in crisis. The officers suggested that I might want to stay somewhere else for the evening while everyone cooled down. They couldn't arrest anyone based on conflicting stories and minor injuries, but they strongly recommended that I give the situation some space before trying to resolve it. As I drove away from my own house for the second time in a week, I could see Ashley through the living room windows, already back to her normal, cheerful, self-serving dinner to her family in my dining room. She'd won this round completely, using my own emotional response against me to make me look like the problem, while she settled even more firmly into my home. I checked into the Hampton Inn downtown and spent the weekend in a fury that felt like rocket fuel. For the first time in my adult life, I was done trying to be reasonable, done trying to preserve family relationships, done trying to find compromises that somehow accommodated everyone else's needs while ignoring my own. Monday morning, I called Henderson Analytics and took a personal day. Then I called Sarah Wellington, the property attorney who'd handled my house closing 3 years earlier. "Sarah, I need help with a family situation that's gotten completely out of hand." Sarah's office was in one of those converted Victorian houses downtown that lawyers seemed to love, all dark wood and leather chairs that were supposed to inspire confidence. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad and occasionally asking for clarification about dates and details. "The good news," Sarah said when I finished, "is that Ashley's police report actually works in your favor. If she was genuinely afraid for her safety, she wouldn't stay in the house. The fact that she's comfortable remaining there suggests that the incident wasn't as serious as she claimed. Sarah pulled out a thick folder and began spreading documents across her desk. The better news is that I handle a lot of these cases. What Ashley and Derek have done is called unauthorized occupancy. And despite what Derek told you about squatters' rights, they have very few legal protections. But he said something about 30 days of continuous occupation. Derek's half right, but he's missing crucial details. Squatters' rights, which are technically called adverse possession, require several elements that don't apply here. The occupation has to be open, notorious, continuous, hostile, and under a claim of right. Ashley and Derek fail on multiple counts, especially the claim of right element, since they initially entered with family permission, even if that permission was invalid. Sarah showed me a stack of papers that looked like they could choke a horse. More importantly, you have something most property owners in this situation don't have: a comprehensive security system that recorded everything. I'd completely forgotten about the security footage in all the chaos. When I'd installed the system 2 years earlier, it had been mostly about protecting the house when I wasn't there. I'd never imagined it would become evidence in a family legal battle. "Let's review what you've got," Sarah said, pulling up the security company's website on her computer. "We'll need footage from the day they moved in, any evidence of unauthorized modifications, and especially the confrontation that led to the police report." Watching the security footage was like seeing the entire situation through a completely different lens. The cameras had captured Derek and Ashley directing movers with the confidence of homeowners, not temporary guests. Derek's installation of the satellite dish was clearly visible, along with his construction of the unauthorized playground equipment. But the footage from the confrontation was the real revelation. The cameras clearly showed Derek grabbing my arm aggressively, me pulling away in self-defense, and Derek deliberately allowing himself to fall dramatically after barely losing his balance. Ashley's performance for the 911 dispatcher was captured in perfect audio detail, including her rehearsed-sounding panic and her careful choice of words to make me sound dangerous. "This is actually fantastic evidence," Sarah said, reviewing the footage. "Derek's behavior constitutes assault and battery. Ashley's police report contains multiple false statements that could be considered filing a false report, which is a misdemeanor." But Sarah had more surprises for me. She'd started running background checks on Derek and Ashley while I was telling my story using resources that weren't available to regular citizens. "Derek has an interesting criminal history," Sarah said, sliding a printout across the desk. 2 arrests for drug possession, 1 conviction for theft, and an outstanding warrant for failure to appear on a driving under the influence charge from 18 months ago. I stared at the paper in shock. Ashley had never mentioned Derek's legal problems, and my parents certainly didn't know about them. If they had known, surely they would never have encouraged Ashley to move into my house with him. "It gets better." Sarah continued, pulling up another screen on her computer. "I also ran a credit check and financial background on both of them. Ashley's bankruptcy filings show a pattern of financial fraud. She's been falsifying employment information on rental applications for years." The evidence was overwhelming. Ashley and Derek weren't just taking advantage of family generosity. They were career con artists who'd found their latest mark in my parents and me. Derek's criminal background suggested that his interest in my house went beyond free housing, and Ashley's history of fraud meant that everything she'd told my parents about her financial situation was probably fabricated. "What can we do about all this?" I asked. "Several things," Sarah said, reaching for her phone. "First, I'm calling the police to report Derek's outstanding warrant. If he's arrested, Ashley's position becomes much weaker. Second, we're filing for an emergency restraining order based on Derek's assault and battery, which will force him off the property immediately. Third, we're documenting all the unauthorized modifications for both insurance purposes and potential criminal charges. Sarah made the first phone call while I sat in her office trying to process the scope of what I'd discovered. My sister hadn't made poor choices or fallen on hard times. She'd deliberately targeted my family for a sophisticated scam that she'd probably pulled on other people before. The police were very interested in Derek's outstanding warrant. Apparently, he'd been avoiding authorities for over a year, and they'd been looking for him. Sarah provided my address and assured them that Derek could be found there most days. "They'll probably execute the warrant tomorrow morning," Sarah told me after hanging up. "Derek will be arrested, and Ashley will suddenly find herself alone in a house she has no legal right to occupy." But Sarah wasn't finished. She'd also been investigating the loan that my parents had mentioned, the one that supposedly used my house as collateral. "Here's something interesting," Sarah said, pulling up another document. "I contacted your mortgage company and the county recorder's office. There is no secondary lien on your property. Your parents haven't actually used your house as collateral for anything." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What do you mean?" "I mean your father lied to you. There's no loan against your house. Gerald never had the legal authority to use your property as collateral, and no legitimate lender would accept a lien from someone who doesn't own the property." Sarah leaned back in her leather chair, clearly enjoying my shocked expression. "My guess is that your parents gave Ashley money and told you about the fake loan to make you feel obligated to help. They probably figured that if you thought your house was already at risk, you'd be more likely to go along with Ashley's housing arrangement." The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. My parents had lied to me about risking my house in order to guilt me into letting Ashley move in. They'd counted on my fear of losing my home to make me cooperate with a plan that benefited Ashley at my expense. The fake loan was psychological warfare designed to make me feel like I had no choice but to help. "So Ashley and Derek are just squatters," I said slowly. "There's no financial crisis, no family obligation, no emergency that requires me to sacrifice my home." "Exactly. And tomorrow morning when Derek gets arrested on that warrant, Ashley is going to find herself very alone and very vulnerable to eviction proceedings." Sarah walked me through the next steps. The police would arrest Derek probably in front of Ashley and the children. Ashley would panic, especially when she realized that Derek's arrest meant his criminal background was now public knowledge. She'd try to call my parents for support, but they'd be dealing with the revelation that Derek was a career criminal they'd been enabling. Most importantly, Sarah concluded, Ashley's false police report gives us grounds for a restraining order against her as well. Once Derek is arrested and Ashley is served with a restraining order, they'll both be legally prohibited from returning to your property. I drove home from Sarah's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had a plan that didn't involve trying to accommodate everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to fight back against family manipulation instead of just enduring it. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing all the evidence Sarah had gathered. The security footage, Derek's criminal background, Ashley's fraudulent financial history, the non-existent loan, all of it painted a picture of systematic deception that had been building for months or maybe years. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Hope you're feeling better. The kids miss their Aunt Janine. Maybe we can talk tomorrow and work things out like family." The message would have made me feel guilty a week ago. Now it just looked like another manipulation tactic, another attempt to use my emotions against my own interests. Ashley was still performing the role of concerned sister, still pretending that our conflict was about my emotional state rather than her criminal behavior. I deleted the message without responding and went to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring justice. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that makes everything feel dramatic and significant. I positioned myself at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my house, close enough to monitor the situation, but far enough away to avoid any direct confrontation. Sarah had advised me to let the professionals handle Derek's arrest, while I maintained plausible distance from the proceedings. At 8:47 in the morning, my phone rang. "They got him." Sarah's voice was crisp and satisfied. "Derek was arrested without incident about 20 minutes ago. Outstanding warrant, plus they found a significant amount of marijuana in his possession, which adds drug charges. He's looking at serious jail time." Through my security system app, I could see Ashley pacing frantically around my living room, her phone pressed to her ear. She'd clearly been calling everyone she could think of, probably starting with my parents and working her way through every family member and friend who might be willing to help. "What happens now?" I asked Sarah. Now Ashley panics. She's alone in a house she has no legal right to occupy, her husband is in jail facing felony charges, and she's about to discover that her entire support system has been based on lies her family told on her behalf. Sarah was right about Ashley's panic. Through the security feed, I could see her throwing things into boxes with increasing desperation. She'd probably realized that Derek's arrest meant his criminal background was now public knowledge, which meant my parents would soon learn that they'd been encouraging their daughter to live with a career criminal. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "Janine, honey, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake. The police arrested Derek this morning, and Ashley is saying terrible things about warrants and drug charges. This can't be right." I could hear the shock and confusion in my mother's voice. Barbara had spent weeks defending Derek as a struggling father trying to support his family. Learning that he was actually a criminal who'd been hiding from police had to be devastating. "It's not a mistake, Mom. Derek has outstanding warrants and a criminal record that goes back years. Ashley knew about it." "That's impossible. Ashley would have told us if Derek had legal problems." "Ashley has been lying to you about a lot of things, Mom. Her financial situation, Derek's background, the reasons they needed housing. None of it was true." The long silence that followed told me that my mother was finally processing the scope of what had been happening. All those months of sending Ashley money, all those family meetings about helping Ashley get back on her feet, all those guilt trips about family obligations, all of it had been based on deliberate deceptions. "How long have you known about this?" Mom asked quietly. "I just found out yesterday when my attorney ran background checks. I hired a lawyer because Ashley filed a false police report against me, and I needed legal help to get my house back." I could hear Barbara crying softly over the phone. My mother wasn't a bad person, just someone who'd been systematically lied to by her own daughter. The realization that Ashley had been manipulating the entire family had to be heartbreaking. "What do we do now?" Mom asked. "Now Ashley leaves my house and finds her own housing. Derek goes to jail for his outstanding warrants, and our family stops enabling Ashley's lies." An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Ashley herself, and her voice was completely different from the confident, entitled tone she'd been using all week. "Janine, please, I need help. Derek's been arrested and I don't know what to do. The police are saying he had drugs and warrants, but that's impossible. This has to be some kind of mistake." "It's not a mistake, Ashley. Derek is a career criminal and you knew it." "That's not true. Derek made some mistakes when he was younger, but he's clean now. He's been working to support our family." Ashley's voice carried the desperate edge of someone whose carefully constructed lies were collapsing around her. She was still trying to maintain her victim narrative, still trying to portray Derek as a reformed man who'd been unfairly targeted by police. Ashley Derek had an outstanding warrant from 18 months ago. He was arrested with drugs in his possession this morning. These aren't old mistakes. These are current crimes. "You don't understand." Ashley's voice was getting higher and more frantic. "Derek's not perfect, but he's a good father. Those drugs weren't his. Someone must have planted them. The police have it wrong." I almost felt sorry for her. Ashley had built her entire life around Derek's lies, just like she'd built her relationship with our family around her own lies. She probably genuinely didn't want to believe that her husband was a criminal, because accepting that truth would mean accepting that her judgment was fundamentally flawed. "Ashley, I'm texting you my attorney's contact information. You have 24 hours to remove yourself and your belongings from my house. After that, you'll be trespassing." "Janine, please, you can't do this. I have children. Where am I supposed to go?" "You should have thought about that before you moved into my house without permission and filed a false police report against me." I hung up the phone and immediately called Sarah to confirm the next steps. Ashley would probably try to stay in the house as long as possible, hoping that family pressure or legal delays would work in her favor. But Derek's arrest had fundamentally changed her position, and she had very few options left. "The restraining order will be served this afternoon," Sarah told me. "Once Ashley receives that, she'll be legally prohibited from remaining on your property. If she refuses to leave, she'll be arrested for trespassing and contempt of court." That afternoon, I watched through my security system as a sheriff's deputy served Ashley with the restraining order. The look on her face when she read the document was a mixture of shock, fear, and rage. She'd probably expected family pressure and guilt trips to resolve the situation in her favor. A legal document ordering her to leave immediately was clearly not part of her plan. Ashley called my parents within minutes of receiving the restraining order, and I could see her pacing frantically around my living room while she talked. She was probably demanding that Gerald and Barbara intervene on her behalf, insisting that families should stick together regardless of legal complications. But my parents' support for Ashley had evaporated along with Derek's freedom. When Gerald called me that evening, his voice was exhausted and defeated. "Janine, we owe you an apology. We didn't know about Derek's background, and we certainly didn't know that Ashley had been lying to us about her financial situation." "What changed your mind?" "We spent the day researching everything your attorney found. Derek's criminal record, Ashley's bankruptcy fraud, all of it. We also called Ashley's old landlord and found out that she'd been lying about the eviction. She wasn't surprised by losing her apartment. She'd been planning to move in with you for months." The admission hung in the air between us. My parents were finally seeing Ashley clearly, probably for the first time in her adult life. The golden child who could do no wrong had been revealed as a career manipulator who'd been exploiting their love and generosity for years. "We're not going to help her fight the restraining order," Gerald continued. "Ashley made her choices, and now she needs to face the consequences. We're worried about the grandchildren, but we can't continue enabling Ashley's behavior." That evening, I received a final text from Ashley. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my family and put 3 innocent children on the street. I'll never forgive you for this." The message was pure manipulation, one last attempt to make me feel guilty for protecting my own property and refusing to enable criminal behavior. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt liberated. For the first time in our relationship, Ashley's emotional manipulation had no power over me. I deleted the message and went to sleep in my hotel room, knowing that tomorrow I'd be going home to my own house for the first time in over a week. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my restored lakehouse porch, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and pink. The property looks better than it ever has thanks to insurance money from Ashley and Derek's damages and restitution payments that are slowly but steadily repairing both my house and my bank account. Ashley served 4 months of community service and completed court-mandated counseling for filing a false police report. Derek received an 18-month sentence for his outstanding warrants plus the drug charges from his arrest. He's currently in minimum security prison about 2 hours away, where Ashley visits him every other weekend with the children. The kids are living with my parents now, which has turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to them. Gerald and Barbara are providing the stability and supervision that Ashley and Derek never offered. Brittany's grades have improved dramatically now that she's not changing schools every few months. Tyler is getting speech therapy for delays that had been ignored for years. Madison is in counseling to help her process the trauma of watching her parents' criminal behavior. My parents learned some hard lessons about enabling destructive behavior. They're attending counseling themselves, working through decades of guilt and misplaced loyalty that allowed Ashley to manipulate them so effectively. Gerald paid off the remaining balance on my mortgage as an apology for the fake loan story. Barbara volunteers at a program that helps families in genuine financial crisis, channeling her desire to help into healthier directions. The most surprising development has been Ashley herself. Facing real consequences for the first time in her adult life forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about her choices and their impact on everyone around her. The court-mandated counseling helped her recognize patterns of manipulation and entitlement that she'd been repeating since childhood. 3 months ago, Ashley asked to meet with me at a neutral location to discuss rebuilding our relationship. I was skeptical, expecting another attempt at manipulation or emotional blackmail. Instead, I found someone I barely recognized. "I know I can't undo what I did to you," Ashley said, sitting across from me at a downtown coffee shop. "I know I violated your trust and your home and your sense of security. I know I tried to manipulate you and hurt you when you refused to enable my bad choices." The conversation lasted 2 hours. Ashley took responsibility for her behavior without making excuses or blaming anyone else. She acknowledged the years of lies she'd told our parents and the way she'd exploited their love to avoid facing consequences. She admitted that she'd known about Derek's criminal background and had hidden it from everyone because she was afraid of losing his financial support, however unreliable it was. "I spent my whole life believing that other people owed me something," Ashley said as our conversation wound down. "I thought you were selfish for wanting to keep your house to yourself. I thought Mom and Dad were obligated to support me because I had kids and you didn't. I thought Derek's problems were just bad luck instead of bad choices. I was wrong about all of it. We're not close friends now and we may never be. But we're rebuilding a relationship based on honesty and boundaries instead of manipulation and guilt." Ashley sees the children regularly under supervised arrangements, and she's working steadily at a retail job while attending night classes to get certified in medical billing. It's the longest she's ever held employment and the first time she's pursued education to improve her prospects instead of looking for shortcuts. Derek's eventual release from prison will be another test for all of us. Ashley has filed for divorce and plans to maintain it, but Derek's manipulation skills are formidable, and his influence over Ashley runs deep. We'll face that challenge when it comes, but for now, Ashley is building the kind of stable, independent life she should have built years ago. The lake house itself has become more beautiful than ever. I used the insurance money to upgrade the security system, reinforce the property boundaries, and create some of the improvements that Derek had planned, but never completed legally. The basement is now a proper home office where I work remotely 3 days a week. The backyard features professional landscaping that can withstand children's play while maintaining the natural beauty that drew me to the property originally. Most importantly, the house feels like mine again. For months after Ashley and Derek left, I struggled with feeling safe and secure in my own space. Every unexpected noise made me wonder if someone was trying to break in. Every family gathering made me worry about manipulation and hidden agendas. Therapy helped me process the violation of trust and learn to set boundaries without guilt or fear. My relationship with my parents is stronger now than it's been since childhood. Confronting their enabling behavior and my own people-pleasing tendencies forced all of us to have honest conversations we'd been avoiding for decades. We still have family dinners and holiday celebrations, but now they're based on mutual respect and clear expectations instead of unspoken obligations and resentment. I've also started dating again, something I'd avoided since my divorce from Marcus. My neighbor Tom, who supported me throughout the crisis with Ashley and Derek, has become much more than a helpful neighbor. He's a widower with grown children who understands the importance of personal boundaries and financial independence. We're taking things slowly, but there's something wonderful about building a relationship with someone who respects my strength instead of trying to exploit my generosity. The most lasting change has been in my own self-perception. For 32 years, I defined myself as the responsible sister, the daughter who didn't cause problems, the person who made sacrifices to keep family peace. I measured my worth by how much I could give and how little I demanded in return. Ashley's invasion of my home forced me to recognize that my generosity had become a tool that others used to exploit me. Setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Protecting my home and my financial security wasn't selfish. It was responsible. Refusing to enable destructive behavior wasn't abandoning family. It was actually the most loving thing I could do because it forced everyone to confront reality instead of living in comfortable lies. The lake outside my window reflects the morning light like a mirror, perfect and undisturbed. 3 years ago, this view represented my hope for peace and independence after years of chaos and manipulation. Today, it represents something even more valuable, the knowledge that I have the strength to protect what matters to me and the wisdom to distinguish between genuine love and emotional manipulation. Family relationships are supposed to be based on mutual respect and support, not obligation and exploitation. True love doesn't demand that someone sacrifice their security for another person's convenience. Real family helps each other become stronger and more independent, not more dependent and vulnerable. I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no to those who would exploit your generosity. That protecting your peace and security isn't selfish but necessary for helping others in genuinely healthy ways. That enabling someone's destructive behavior doesn't help them. It just postpones the day when they'll have to face the consequences of their choices. Setting boundaries has allowed me to be more generous with my time and resources, not less. When I help family members now, it's from a position of strength rather than obligation. When I say yes to requests for support, it means something because they know I'm also capable of saying no. My relationships are healthier because they're based on choice rather than guilt. The sunrise is complete now, painting the entire lake in warm golden light. I'm sitting in my own chair on my own porch, looking at my own view secured by my own hard work and protected by my own strong boundaries. This is what peace feels like. This is what security means. This is what happens when you choose self-respect over people-pleasing and authentic love over emotional manipulation. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and protecting your own boundaries? How do you balance being generous with family while avoiding being taken advantage of? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't cruel but necessary, and remember that protecting your peace isn't selfish but essential. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the strength to protect what matters most to you.